Yeah, I brought up this video, this book actually in a previous video, and I just wanted to go into it a little more. It was written over 800 years ago by a philosopher, Maimonides, and it was written originally in Arabic, so it's completely translated. And what I found here is something really interesting. He's actually seeing the cognitive functions, which is really interesting. So I'm gonna. It's quite an. I haven't read it in a while, but what he's seeing is the cognitive functions, and he's seeing them in a different way. And it's really interesting to see that someone else has seen these 800 years ago. And I wanted to just give you the straight data from the book, just so you can see how someone else might have perceived this. So here, the chapter starts up here, but I'm going to go down. So there's 5 elements of the soul, and the soul is a psyche. One that governs nutrition. Now, nutrition isn't going to be a cognitive function. It's going to be all of the automatic bodily processes, like breathing. Well, breathing is not completely automatic, but you get what I mean. It's the medulla oblongata, however you pronounce it. It's your blood flow. It's your digestion. It's everything there. So that's nutrition. So that's not going to be part of the cognitive. But then he's going to talk about the other 4, right? There's the 5 parts. Sensation, which we have, sensory, imagination, which is intuition, and he'll explain them later. Stimulation, and he calls and this is basically feeling. He calls it stimulation, and conceptualization. This is thinking. And as mentioned previously in this chapter, like higher up, we are concerned only with the function of these elements within the human soul. For the power that governs the human nutrition differs from the power governing the. Let me move that up here. The nutrition of a horse or a donkey, right? So he's saying, let's just talk about humans, and he gives like a metaphor of like, okay, there's 3 lights. There's a candle, there's the moon, and then there's the sun, right? All of these are lighting up a room. You could say they're all light, but they all come from a different source. So the sensation of a donkey is going to be different from the sensation of a human because it's got a different source to it, and like that just makes sense. The way the donkey is sensing or intuiting is going to be different. And then by the end of the chapter, he also alludes to that there's actually, let's see where. So okay, yeah. So here, know that this one soul, whose powers and elements have been as form, when is not given form through intellect, it will be as if preparation. It's kind of weird. It's received form as it were not. Let's see what he's talking about. Because he's also splitting the soul up into 3 other parts, and these 5 parts are one of the 3 parts. And so he's taking like knowledge as a separate part of the soul. So here he's talking about just the cognition in the soul, right? The applied realm involves actual intellectual activities. The abstract realm, by contrast, involves the study of entities that are unchanging by the study of wisdom. Okay. But anyway, let's get into those 4 types, how he defines the 4 functions, which is really interesting. So here's nutrition, and here we go. The element governing sensation is the source of the 5 senses: sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. It's found throughout the body and does not have specific organs that control it, as do the other 4 senses. What's he talking about? Touch. Okay, all right. It's throughout the body. The element of imagination. Okay, so he talked about the sensory. Imagination. The power relates to the faculty of memory in some way. That's what he's saying, and makes it possible to recall impressions of various incidents after they no longer are perceivable by the senses. This faculty can also combine and separate different recollections. Thus, this power has the potential to develop a notion that was never thought of previously. So that's sort of like NE that can develop something new, or even NI can do that, and cannot be understood based on one's previous perception. For example, one might imagine an iron ship flying through the air, right? And 800 years ago, there were no airplanes. Or a man with his head in the heavens and his feet on the earth. That still hasn't happened. Unless you cut his head off, I guess. A beast with 1,000 eyes. Well, I guess at the time they didn't know that maybe spiders had 1,000 eyes, or bees or something. Many impossible things of this nature can be conceived by the power of imagination. In this matter, the sect of Medablim, and the Medablim were an Arabic sect that just sat around philosophizing all day. So he says, and Maimonides was really into all of the philosophy of the day. He knew like vast things. He was also a doctor. He was in charge of healing the head of Egypt at the time as well, the leader of Egypt. So he had his hands in everything, but he was really into philosophy. So he talks about the Medablim here, how they erred grossly and established a false foundation with regard to distinctions concerning that which must exist, what may exist, and what cannot exist. For they thought or imagined that anything that could be imagined by a person could actually exist, right? So this was their idea, that if you can imagine it, it can exist, right? And he's saying, well, it can't. Okay, I don't know why he goes into such detail on this, but now he talks about stimulation, right? So that was intuition. Now he's talking about stimulation. Is the power that attracts or repels a person from an entity. The actions this power will inspire are seeking, fleeing, the appreciation of a particular entity, or the rejection of it, anger, desire, fear, courage, cruelty, mercy, love, hate, or many other emotional states. So it's really cool that he's getting these cognitive functions as the 4 parts of the soul. The vessel that expresses these various actions are the limbs and organs. So he's saying the limbs and organs are the vessel for these. For example, the action of the hands is motion, the action of the feet is walking, the action of the eyes is sight, and the action of the heart is either courage or fear, right? So I don't know why he's attaching it, it's 800 years ago, but he's attaching these feelings to parts of the body in some way. And maybe the body can be representations of these feelings. Similarly, the other organs, limbs of the body, and their actions are vessels that express this power of stimulation, okay? Now he talks about the last one. The element of conceptualization is the power granted to man that enables him to think and contemplate. Think. He acquires knowledge and distinguishes positive activities from undesirable ones. The term activities refers to both applied and the abstract realms. The applied realm involved, right? So applied realm, I guess, would be TE, and abstract would be TI, maybe. Who knows? The applied realm involves both actual and intellectual activities. The abstract realm, by contrast, involves the study of entities that are unchanging by this study, is referred to as wisdom. Okay. Know that this one soul, whose power and elements have been described from above, can be compared to matter, from which intellect serves as form. So he's talking about, this is something that philosophy often talks about: form, matter, form. How matter comes in different forms. When the soul is not giving form through the intellect, it will be as if the preparation of the soul to receive a form was for naught. So he's separating the intellect from thinking. He's calling the thinking function something different than the intellect, right? So when he's talking about the soul, he's just talking about the cognitive aspect of it. So that's something that I found interesting as well, that he saw that everyone can think, everyone can process things. And so yeah, he goes into some cool thought experiments on how the functions are different, how maybe sensing is, and for me it's not always completely accurate. Like he says, sensing, how do we know sensing is not something that we have conscious control over? Like we can control our sensing because it's active when we're awake, and when we're asleep it's inactive. That means it has to, right? You can't have senses. And I guess they've proved that sense of smell still works when you sleep. But other than that, your other senses kind of don't really influence you, and your imagination does, right? So he's claiming that imagination is more unconscious than your senses. Your senses are more conscious in this way, in these thought experiments. So I just wanted to show that like these Jungian functions actually have been observed before and theorized on before in the past. And I thought it was really cool that, like, when I first read this book, I didn't really know about the cognitive functions, like I said, maybe 15 years ago. And now coming back to it a little bit, I saw how the cognitive functions actually are here, and this is what he's actually talking about in the whole book. So it's kind of interesting. Anyways, have a good one. And I know it wasn't anything that, like, we're rare that I come up with a video where it's nothing to do with, it's nothing new. It's none of my own ideas. It's just pure reading from a text, but it's a text that no one else would have really read from if I hadn't done it. So anyway, have a good one.